Welcome to another session of Stelmo's Rants and Raves. I'm Stelmo. Let's just jump right in here. So, here, I don't know, an hour or so ago, I was listening to Mr. Gouvier, and I sure hope I'm saying his surname correctly. Anyway, he's one of my favorite YouTube channels. He gives, as an attorney, he gives a very good legal explanations and things, and I think certainly more people should listen to him. But the main idea, or the main point I want to make about listening to him, is he was going over a filing that the Trump DOJ has made, and in it they're informing the court that the court doesn't have jurisdiction to do the actions that they're doing. And I get so frustrated when I see this because, okay, this is merely the DOJ's assertions and pleadings before the court. But there have been, I don't know how many cases that are final, and the final disposition was the lower court never had jurisdiction to do what they did. And there is a solution to this. And I believe if they use this solution, they're only going to have to use it once or twice, and the message will get out there. And the message is simple. They need to sue these judges. Now, I know if you ask most attorneys, they're going to say, oh, no, you can't sue a judge. They have absolute immunity. And I'll never forget reading that Supreme Court case that granted judges absolute immunity. And I had to laugh because initially it made no sense to me, but I finally figured it out. I'm saying to myself, why would they, in one paragraph, define something called absolute immunity? And we all know what absolute means. And then in the following paragraph, give you the exception to the absolute immunity. So there is a bright line exception, and it is when a judge acts without having jurisdiction to do so. And in a republic, it has to be that way. You can't have judges, let's say, stopping people on the road and saying, I want you to appear in my court, and then having ruling over them. That's not how our system works. Of course, our system is breaking down because too many on the right are slowly surrendering to the left. And I think that's one of the sad parts. But, okay, I'll be honest here and say there is no case of the federal government suing a federal judge. But that does not mean it can't be done. And in some of these cases, the president could also be a litigant in his personal capacity. And I don't think the president realizes that there is this option on the table. Because you have judges like Boasberg. Now, I know in Boasberg's cases that the Supreme Court has ultimately ruled at least once, and I think it was 2 or 3 times, that he didn't have jurisdiction to do what he did. And one of these cases, when he's ordering planes to be turned around in the middle of the air. You know, the United States spent a lot of money in that. And they need to sue that judge to recoup as much of that money as possible. Trust me, when these judges find out that they're going to be held civilly liable when they usurp jurisdiction, you know, this is something that everyone can check on. Read yourself some appellate decisions. And in almost every case, although there's no rule or law or anything mandating this, in almost every situation, they're going to start the opinion describing why they have jurisdiction over the case. And the reason is simple. If they don't have jurisdiction, everything they do is moot. It doesn't matter. And this is an avenue available to the Trump administration. And, you know, one of the problems that I have with the Republicans in general is that they don't believe in pushback. They're forever saying, oh, well, you can't get a conviction in Washington, D.C., so what's the bother? Well, I'll tell you what the bother is. It's called pushback. And these litigants that you charge, even if they're ultimately exonerated, they're going to pay thousands of dollars, perhaps tens of thousands, and in some of their cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars in lawyers' fees that are non-compensable. That's coming out of their pocket. So once you start putting their personal finances in jeopardy, I think you're going to have these judges looking at these matters in a different way. But instead, I keep hearing they don't have jurisdiction to do this, they don't have jurisdiction to do that. And yeah, most of this stuff is working its way through the courts, and the courts are finding this. But there's no incentive to stop these judges. This doesn't happen when the Democrats are in charge, because they get everybody on board. And if somebody isn't on board, they ostracize them and move them aside. And, so I don't know ultimately what or how this is going to play out. But it's frustrating because there is another avenue, an avenue that the president and his DOJ can take that at least could perhaps cause some of these judges to think twice before they so recklessly act. And trust me, if anybody listens to this and if they have any kind of sway or pull into the Trump administration, they need to let the president know that this option is out there. I'm convinced he doesn't know. And I'm convinced that if he asks the lawyers, they're going to say, oh, you can't sue a judge, they have absolute immunity. Well, it's not absolute. There is an exception. And many of these judges are going down the route of that exception. And so, trust me, if the shoe was on the other foot, these loony leftists would be, well, let's look. They allowed protesters, even though they knew it was against the law, to allow this around the justices of the Supreme Court's homes. And, somebody was charged, I believe, with planning to take out Kavanaugh. And why did they allow this? Well, they allowed it for a simple reason. They hate conservatives. They wouldn't mind seeing another one bite the dust. And they could replace them then with another loony leftist. It's simple. And then you have somebody like, I'm not even going to mention her name now. She's crying about her security. Well, you keep voting with these loony leftists, okay? Because they're never going to forgive you. They're never going to accept you no matter how much you rule in favor for them. You know why? Because you're associated with the Republican Party. And you know what they want to do with everybody who's associated with the Republican Party, don't you? There is, you went to law school, and in the process of getting there, I'm sure you had some history lessons. And I'm sure you learned what socialists do once they consolidate power, what they do to their opposition. The lines of people on gurneys heading into the morticians' offices is quite extensive. Usually, in most countries, it's numbers in the millions because they don't tolerate dissent. Not at all. No matter how much you may... And I laugh at all of these rhinos who think that just because they're accepting illicit payments, that they'll get a break because they were assisting the right side. All you're doing is putting you and your family in jeopardy. And your families, that's a sad part about socialists. They go after the whole family. And so a lot of these Republicans, they need to be thinking about their family when they make their decisions. Because, especially the rhinos, it's not going to bode well for you or your family. And I know, you think you're going to be the exception, but sadly, you're going to find out. And of course, I don't want to find out because at the time when you're finding out, we're all living under socialism watching the country collapse in front of us. And people all around the world will be happy and cheering. And this is, the thing that they want. I don't get it. I'll say time and time again, I fail to understand this. Now, with that being said, on the war front, we've now lost a couple GIs. And again, it gets frustrating because I hear the president time and time again telling us how they have nothing left. And yet, having nothing left, they're able to kill Americans. They're able to destroy other infrastructure there in the Middle East. And I keep saying the problem, okay, let me back up and say, the Trump administration has once again taken up the attack. But when I listen to these politicians, they're still hoping to negotiate some sort of deal with these loons over there in Iran. And even though the president knows they can't be trusted, so I don't understand why you're delaying the inevitable. You need to end this, and the only way to end it is to defeat them, a solid defeat. Start getting weapons to the Iranian people. A good 90 to 95% of the people in Iran want the current regime gone. These people would gladly be the boots on the ground if you just get them some weapons. No, I'm not talking about missiles and rockets or anything like that. Get them rifles, maybe some shotguns, some pistols, whatever they could use. Iran is a prime example of what happens when a populace doesn't have a Second Amendment like we do. They don't have the weapons to fight back. And they're asking for the weapons, and I, for the life of me, cannot understand why the Trump administration hasn't gotten the weapons to them. I'm not even going to buy that we don't have the capacity or capabilities to do it. Now, we can get it done if we choose, but for some reason, we've decided we don't want to do this. For some reason, we've decided we want to negotiate with people who notoriously don't live up to any agreement that they do agree to. Look, I've said this now for a long time. The repercussions of what's going on over there are going to be felt by the whole world for at least probably a decade, if not longer. And this is only exponentially growing. And it's going to continue to grow and be problematic until we end it, until we really get the Strait of Hormuz fully open and operational. Yet I don't see that happening anytime soon. I don't understand why. I really, this is one of the things where I am completely baffled by the president. The only thing I can say is here in his third term, he's decided he wants to be the president of peace. Well, let me tell you, that's all well and good. Peace is a great thing. But I don't think it pays to put that kind of language out there because our enemies are emboldened by it, okay? They know you don't want to fight. And that's what you're showing in Iran, that you will do every and anything to prevent having to have a military victory. You don't think that the Russians and Chinese aren't licking their lips looking at this? Ditto that for the darn North Koreans. They're really whacked out over there, but, they're happy as could be. They see the indecision here of America in deciding, what are we going to do? And you have to remember, the president told us that the only solution was unconditional surrender. So he lied to us when he said that, apparently. It's not true. In fact, he's willing to negotiate most of the points that were non-negotiable. The more I hear about the negotiations, the more I realize we're surrendering and they're winning. Now, okay, like I said, the battle's back on right now. I don't know how long it's going to be on because they're already saying, yeah, we're continuing to negotiate. And the Iranians are, I can't talk too loud about it, but because they just want to end the fighting. And if they have to lie to do so, they do it. Because their religion, the Quran says, you can lie to the infidel, and it's fine. It's not sinful. And we have to understand that. Which I think, no matter how much it may be brought up, I think these people say, oh, well, that's not really the case. No, we can deal with these people. Nobody could effectively deal with them for nearly 5 decades. Here, President Trump was handed the keys to being the greatest president of all times. And I maintain that while he's still going to go down as a great president, he's going to have a lot of tarnish on that record. And I know he's not going to like that, but he's the one who can change it, and he doesn't seem willing to. You know, here in his third term, he's done a lot of things that I think they're self-inflicted wounds. Certainly the Epstein file. Now, I heard J.D. Vance yesterday or 2 days ago, whatever it was, talking about how the messaging on the Epstein files could have been better. Oh, yeah, really? How about a little more information? How about some arrest? Because, see, with no arrest, the people are going to know it's been a whitewash right from the start. You know, I don't know who it is they're protecting, but it doesn't bode well for the president and his family. Because, you see, they were the victims of a multi-tier justice system. And they're establishing to us that having a multi-level justice system is acceptable. Because apparently, for whatever reason, the people who violated alleged juveniles are getting off all scot-free. And I don't understand that. I fail to understand it other than to say, you know, it's somebody with an awful lot of power. And it's kind of sad that they have more power than our president of the United States. But that's what our president keeps telling us here in his third term. You know, Trump in his first term, when he got in office, you know, he was gung-ho to make sure he accomplished everything he promised. Whereas here in this term, that's not the case. Now, you know, I want to give some kudos while I'm thinking about it to J.D. Vance. You know, it was just, again, yesterday, day before, whatever, recently, last couple days, whatever. You know, I've heard him come out and say that, and hold on one second here. So sorry about that. But anyway, so J.D. Vance has come out, and what he has said is that, and why I'm, like I say, you know, I've told you all I have a short-term memory problem because I accepted 2 of those poison pens that they injected in our arm during the pandemic. And for some reason, I'm having just the hardest time remembering what J.D. Vance says. And fortunately, it just has come back to me. And so what he come out and said, and he's been the first politician to be accurate on this because our president and certainly Scott Bessent and Lutnick, they've all been gaslighting us as far as to what it is, and it has to do with Social Security. The president ran pledging no taxes on Social Security, and that's not actually what got passed in the big, beautiful bill. All that senior citizens got was an added write-off, which amounts, if they're paying the highest tax rate, it amounts to like $200 difference, which is a far cry from no tax on Social Security. And even though they knew that there was still tax on Social Security, they continued to gaslight us. And it was just like I said, in the last couple of days, J.D. Vance has come out and he accurately stated what they did. And they gave a tax credit to seniors. But it's only, I believe it was $5,000 $5,000 deduction. So at a 40% rate, that's $200. Not it's a far cry from no tax on Social Security. Now, look, I get it that in these bills and things, you're not going to get everything you want, and some things are going to go by the wayside. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. The problem I have is them lying about it and continuing to say that they got no tax on Social Security when they didn't do it. But anymore, it just seems that both parties have very little respect for the voters. Because it's really an insult to them, lying to them like this and thinking that they're going to snow them. But that's what they think. And there's no way around that. So, again, I'm going to give a rave, because I don't do many raves because I got too much to rant about. But I'm going to rave about J.D. Vance being honest and merely explaining what actually did happen. So anyway, it's a crazy world we live in. It continues to stay crazy. From each day, you don't know what we're going to find out or not. I'll tell you the one thing, though, we can pretty much bank on is very few arrests coming out of the DOJ. None of these politicians, none of these upper echelon people, none of them are going to pay a price. And somehow the Republicans think that their party, are going to survive this. And I don't think they can, but I will concede that they may have information that I'm not privy to. But from everything I can see and gathered together, we are in deep trouble, because Donald Trump only has 4 years here in his third term. He's rapidly approaching the halfway point. And when you look at what's happened in that time, it's been very, very little. And that's a sad part. But it's so in line with the Republican Party, which is the party of do nothing. They know how to talk a big game to the voters, but when it comes to actually acting, they're AWOL. Absolutely AWOL. And that's a shame. But anyway, I've ranted and raved enough for now, and I'm going to let you all go. Have a safe day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.